Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shalom.
I hope you've all had a prosperous week, an uplifting week, and appreciate you two coming over here. Hope you find it uplifting and inspirational, and hope you can learn something, and hope this won't be the last time that you come.
Amen.
Let's go ahead and open in prayer, shall we? Holy Abba, Father, in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, Abba, Father, I want to thank you not only for this Sabbath day and our gathering as Mishpachah, as family, to serve you and to worship you and to learn of your word and inquire of your righteousness and total and complete reliance on the blood and the righteousness of Yeshua HaMashiach in all of our lives, Abba, that sustains us. Abba, Father, my heart is a little grieved right now, and I won't get into that at the moment, but you know it's come with great pain to be able to get to this point here today, to be able to give this message. So I know that your word says that when our flesh is weak, you will be strong if we allow it, and that there's nothing too great that you can't do. And so I'm asking, Abba, through my weakness, can you please come, I supplicate, and ask you and petition you to come and be strong through me where I am not able to be, Abba. And I pray that that my words are your words, like we read in the Torah, Abba, that we become as like Elohim, as your representatives, as your ambassadors for your kingdom here on this earth when we articulate your word. And so, Abba, I just want to thank you that all the trials and the tribulations you've put me through is not for naught, but it's all for a reason and a purpose, which in all of our lives we're all trying to discover what is the reason for the things that we go through. And so, Abba, I pray that even as I speak and I'm not understanding everything, that you open my mind to teach me as I speak, as your words come through here today. So we just want to bless you and we want to praise you, and we pray for those that are not amongst us right now or are sick or who cannot be here, and that you would be with them and you'll comfort them and the rest of the body of Messiah around the world who are assembling on the Sabbath day to honor you. So we just bless you and we thank you, Abba, in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen.
Amen.
Well, today's message is called Enduring Hard Trials to Serve Him. Enduring Hard Trials to Serve Him. And this message is a really interesting one because, you know, our flesh doesn't really want to serve Yahweh. And every day when we get up out of bed, we have a battle on our hands, because whether you're serving him in how you deal with your husband or your wife, or you're dealing with other people around you, or whether you're in ministry or trying to start a ministry, your flesh is always at battle with you, trying to pull you back and restrict you from doing that which you were called to do. And as we're reading today in the Torah portion, how Yahweh called Moses out of Midian to go back to Egypt because he had a mandate. He had a job that he had to do. And little did he realize just what an awesome and responsibility it was to go back to Egypt and pull these people out. And he had to go through a lot of trials and tribulations in order to achieve that. And so for us, it's no different. In this life, it is Abba Father's will that we be doing his business. We've talked about it in the past, about witnessing to people, instructing people. The thing that I find so difficult to fight against is you're dealing with a society of people today who don't want to listen. They don't want to shema.
Right.
They don't want to hear, and they don't want to understand with intellectual understanding. And they may get something on a surface level, but they don't really get it down deep in the heart. It never goes past their mind into their heart. It just stays in their mind, and then it usually dissipates from there. And so we have a generation we're dealing with who does not want to listen to Yahweh's instruction. And as sons of Elohim, it is our responsibility for each and every one of us as individuals as well as collectively to get to a point in all of our lives that we collectively come to a point where we know in Scriptures it says that the earth moans and groans and waits for the revealing of the sons of Elohim, which is who we are. There's going to be a lot of trials and tribulations. There's going to be a lot of heartache. There's going to be a lot of frustration that comes with in pursuit of that kind of a lifestyle. And it's not an easy one. And for many months, I've been going through a number of different things that have tried to sidestep me from doing my mandate. And quite frankly, there are a number of times where I know that Yahweh was saying, you got to get back to teaching. You got to get back to teaching. Some of you have been saying the same thing. And here I am today, and I will say, with all honesty, my flesh screamed and yelled and fought all the way for me not to be here today to give this message. And it is very difficult when you embroil yourself or engulf yourself in a ministry and you're doing it for a while, and for some reason you have to get out for personal reasons for a little while. You plan to come back, but the problem is coming back is not so easy. It's very difficult. And the lesson, if I can impart to this one, is, like Yeshua said, it's so true. If you put your hands to the plow, don't look back. And there are people around us, family, friends, acquaintances, some that are so close to you, your wife or your husband, who's going to draw you away from that mandate. And out of sympathy and compassion for what that person is going through, you lay your life down for that person, but then you lose the life that you were supposed to lay down for the body of Messiah. That's a tough trade-off. And I tell you, it's not an easy thing and not an easy answer I came to with this. I battle like a scale on both sides. One day it's up, one day it's down. And it's like, which one is the weightier one that you go with? And these are the struggles of the human condition when we step out and we try to do what we're supposed to do. We're struggling to understand the mandate. We're trying to understand the instructions. We're trying to understand the path that we're supposed to be on. But that path is very elusive because the enemy comes in and the enemy's constantly trying to redefine that path. Yeah. But at the end of the day, the whole point is Yahweh is testing us to endorse us. Testing us, you are being tested to be endorsed. That comes with a price. Some of us are going to just barely make it into the kingdom because we weren't willing to do very much. We weren't willing to challenge ourselves to a higher standard. And I had this conversation with somebody very recently. And the person's stubborn and the person doesn't want to listen. And I'm saying, you're in trouble because you won't challenge yourself to put a stop to your destructive behavior. And it's frustrating because you can see that the Ruach is convicting that person. As they look in your eyes, they're receiving what you're saying, but their flesh is screaming at them, resist, resist, resist. And so you can't penetrate that flesh. And so you're left with saying to the person, all I can really do is pray for you. But if Yahweh isn't even going to change your heart because you won't let him, who do I think I am? This is the state of mind of people, so many people that I come across. Seems like Yahweh brings me the most hardened, arrogant, belligerent, stubborn-headed, stiff-necked people on the face of this planet. And I don't know, maybe because I don't, I'm a very direct person, as many of you know, and I'm just going to say it like it is. But enough with the introduction. I'm just kind of laying down some of my experiences, and I think you all know what I'm talking about. But we didn't read this part of the Torah portion today, but we'll start off with Exodus 1, chapter 1, verse 13 and 14. And it says, and so the Egyptians made the children of Israel serve with rigor, and in Hebrew that means perek. And what it means is severe cruelty. Severe cruelty. It just wasn't tough. It was severe cruelty. Cruelty is bad enough as it is, but when it's severe cruelty, that's like adding insult to injury, isn't it? But that's what it says in the Hebrew. Verse 14, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage. And so this is the problem that we have in this life, is that our lives can become so hard and so difficult in the midst of the trial that Yahweh is putting us through, because he's trying to test us so we can be endorsed. But yet, if we allow the spirit of bitterness and resentment to come inside of us because we resent what we're going through, in essence, we are fighting against Yahweh himself. Because he's the one that mandated that trial come into your life. And the reason why that trial is in your life to begin with is to root out and bring up to the surface that imperfection that exists within inside every one of us. That is the design, that is the purpose of why you're going through what you're going through. Because if you were a master in that area of your life, there would be no need for that trial. Instead, he will give you a different trial in an area where you're weak, because he wants to perfect us. He wants to refine us as gold. And he's trying to get us all together to one place at one converging moment when the sons of Elohim are glorified on this earth. Because we will be the final witnesses on this earth, if we're so privileged to still be alive when that time comes. If not us, it'll be another generation. But we can't hang on that. We have to decide to work out our own salvation in fear and trembling while we're here on this earth. For the last 35 years, I was taught that Yeshua is going to come back, in the next couple of years, and one prophecy fails after another. I said, to hell with these prophets out there. They don't know what they're talking about. Stop listening to them. And I got rid of that a long time ago. In mortar, in brick, and all manner of service in the field. All their service in which they made them serve was with rigor or severe cruelty. And and I know it happens to me. It happened to me yesterday. Somebody developed severe cruelty to me. And I was enraged at that attitude. And I had to reprimand that person because I was being falsely accused. And now in hindsight, I know that the devil didn't want me to come here to give this message today, so he's trying to put a stumbling block to stop me from coming and get me upset. But fortunately, Yahweh, like Ezekiel, has given me a forehead as hard as a diamond, and not much penetrates my head. So I can separate these different events and still move on, at least at this level. It's not always so easy, but you just have to work through it. And that's the point, is that when you're going through these trials, the devil's going to hurl so many things at you that they're going to be distractions. And so it behooves us as individuals to understand the attack of the enemy and what the purpose of that attack is, and to compose yourself and to not allow yourself to get sidetracked. You deal with what you got to deal with, but then you got to put it off to the side, and you got to be like a bull in a china cabinet, and you're going through there and you're going to wreck what you got to wreck. Because you're you're piercing into the kingdom of darkness to bring the light of Yeshua to dismantle the world of darkness. In Psalms, let me back up. Trials bring out the worst in people, and to illustrate that one does not possess the power on their own to end the trial. We of ourselves do not possess the power. The power is with Messiah Yeshua, his blood, his righteousness. We do have power, though, as I told this person. You have the power of your inner person and your mind to be in agreement with each other. I am done with this behavior, and I want it to stop. And I said, if you would seek Yahweh, and if you would confess that you're guilty of this thing and you want to end it, he'll give you the answer just like that. But you don't want it. You don't want it. And I can see that you don't want it. And so nothing anybody can say or do to you is going to change your mind, at least not at this point. But rather illustrates the need for Yahweh to step in. And boy, we just have so many examples, like we were reading about Moses. Moses is pleading, my speech is not good, I can't do this, let me go get this other people, and let them be your representative. Yahweh saying, hold on a second, man, I'm the one who's in the driver's seat, I'm the one that makes the rules here, And so we want to make excuses for why we are not adequate enough. That in itself is exactly why Yahweh chose you to do what he wants you to do, because you're not adequate enough. Why do you go to college to pursue a career? Because you're not adequate enough in your scholastic understanding to take on a job as a chemist or a physicist or whatever it is you're pursuing. So you go to college so that you get the skill. Well, we're in the college of the kingdom of Yahweh, where we're studying his word, we're studying his righteousness, and we're trying to apply it to our lives and figure out, how do we apply these principles in this world, in this Egypt we live in, and how do we make it work? when everything is so stacked against us. And it is, because the forces of darkness really come against us. And it's really, really hard, and it's really, really frustrating. And frustration itself is a spirit, something that we all have to fight against, to not allow the spirit of frustration to get in. Because once you let it through that door and it creeps itself into your life, it begins to dismantle everything that you're supposed to be doing on that path. In Psalm chapter 40, verses 1 through 4, it says, I waited patiently for Yahweh, and he inclined to me and heard my cry. You know when you get somebody's ear? You know, they're not paying attention to you, and all of a sudden you say something. Come again? What was that you said, Joshua? See, now you got his ear. He also brought me out of a horrible pit. And the word for pit is bore, used as a cistern or a dungeon. Some of you have been to Israel. You've seen cisterns over there. You know what I'm talking about. Of the miry clay, and set my feet upon a rock, which is a fortress and a stronghold. So that rock is a fortress and a stronghold. And we know oftentimes when it's talking in the Old Testament about the rock, it's talking about Yeshua. And he is our fortress and our stronghold. And established my steps. He has put a new song in my mouth, praise to our Elohim. You know, this is so hard. You know, you read it in principle, and it's one thing. But when you're in a place where you're outside your mandate, you're outside your calling, or you've fallen away from the faith, or you're in the faith, but you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you have this lackadaisical attitude, and there's something pulling you on the inside that's saying you got to come back to your first love. You got to get back to the foundation. You got to get back to what you're supposed to be doing, like what you were doing before. What is the matter with you? And you feel this voice inside of you that's screaming at you, and your flesh is saying, leave me alone, back off, back up the truck. I don't want to do it. I like where I am right now. But then you hate yourself at the same time. You want this new song. But it's not easy to get this new song. Because what you're going to have to go through to get this new song is pure hell. You're going to have to go through pure hell for your spirit to be rejuvenated to get this new song back in your mouth. Because Yahweh's not going to give you that song until he knows that you're convinced, that he's convinced that you are convinced that you're on the right track. Then he can endorse you. And then he will give you the new song. And then joy and happiness will be back in your heart again about doing the Father's will. It behooves every one of us to understand what is our Father's will for you. Not collectively. Because when we look at it collectively, it's easier to say, oh, well, you know, Joshua's really good with the music and he knows how to talk about the Torah, and Kamar knows the Hebrew and this and that and the other. I'll let them guys do it. That's a cop-out. You have a responsibility, and you have to take that on yourself. And if you're new to the faith, and you think like you don't know much, you start with where you're at. It's not about being in this for so many years that you can't at least start the process. Because Yahweh can use anybody. Just like Moses. Look at Moses. Moses was living in the desert in Midian. He was tending sheep and stuff like that and raising a family. And all of a sudden he went from that to, he's basically a high priest leading the children of Israel out of Egypt. How does that happen? Didn't happen because of him, only because he said, okay, I'll do it. So we have to have the same mentality that no matter what trial and tribulation or hardship you got in front of you, you can't allow that to stop you from doing what you know you got to do. You got to encourage yourself. You got to feed yourself. You got to have people around you who believe in what Yeshua is doing inside you. I'm fortunate enough that I have some of that. Because I'm telling you, I've been in some dark places in the last months. Even as of yesterday. But you can't roll over like a possum and play dead. You just can't do that. Yahweh doesn't want cowards. He wants people that are very strong. In the sense that you're relying on him for that strength. Many will see it and fear and will trust in Yahweh. Praise to our Elohim. Blessed is the man that makes Yahweh his trust and does not respect the proud, nor such as turn aside to lies. You have to have a take no prisoners mentality in this world. You really do. I'm not a politician, but I will say that one of Trump's characteristics is that, exactly. He takes no prisoners. He marks the sheep from the goat. He knows who are the rebellious ones and who are the ones on his side, and he goes right down the middle and he separates it. There are a lot of people that like to join the two together and mix it. That don't work. You can't do that. That's why Yahweh said in his word that we're not to mix seed. You can't do it. I'm not saying you withdraw yourself from the evil in the world. What I'm saying is you can't have fellowship with them.
That's right.
They don't believe what you believe. When do we wake up and stop the craziness? They don't believe what you believe. And they're not going to believe what you believe as long as you pander to them. Make a stand. Make your statement. They need to know their role and shut up and sit down. You're in control because you serve the king. They don't serve the king. You serve the king. Know your role. Know your role. There's too many in the body of Messiah that just roll over and play dead, and they roll with the punches. And they don't stand for anything. The character is not there. We'll get into that a little bit, but the character is not there. The righteous character to know how to rightly divide the word of truth and know when to apply this and when to apply that. That takes time. I get that. It takes time. But that's what our responsibility is to study the word to understand what is correct and what is not correct. What is true doctrine? What is not true doctrine? If it's not true doctrine, discard it. Get rid of it. Run from it. It's not biblical. Too many, oh my gosh, too many people are just playing with fire. They really are. And their day is going to come, and I fear for them. Like I said to this other person, I said, I fear for you. I really fear for you. It is in the midst of the trial that one has to acknowledge that they are trapped. This is another problem. Because there are people who are in the middle of a trial, they're actually held captive by the enemy as a stronghold in that trial, and they aren't even consciously aware that they're trapped in the midst of that trial. Yet the very important part of that trial is Yahweh's trying to use that trial as a vehicle to get you out, that you might be able to make a way of escape so that you might be able to bear the trial that you're going through. I can't see that. I can't see it. And they start giving all kinds of excuses for why they're going what they're going through. And they can't see the devil has got your carcass. He already has you. Well, I don't see it like that. The deceitfulness of sin is a terrible thing. It's self-induced delusion. In Psalms 95, verses 1 through 11, it says, O come, let us sing to Yahweh. Let us shout, and that Hebrew word is ra, which means to the point of splitting the ears. How often do we really do that? To the point of splitting the ears, joyfully to the rock of our salvation, which is Yeshua. To the rock of our salvation. Verse 2, let us come before his presence with thanksgiving. By extending our hands with adoration, let us shout joyfully to him with psalms. For Yahweh is great, is the great Elohim, and the great King above all Elohims. In his hand are deep places of the earth. The heights of the hills are his also. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before Yahweh our Maker. For he is our Elohim, and we are the people of his pasture, and the sheep of his hand. Today, if you will hear Shema, and the word Shema means hear with intelligence. This is where I believe a lot of people have the problem. They hear, but not with intelligence. And that's why they can't divide the word of truth. They don't know why this doctrine is right and this one is wrong. Can't figure it out. Both sound good. They both have good arguments. And I'll concede that. The devil is a very crafty attorney. He has a way of wording things and giving reasonings to support his perspective and his doctrine with these other religions to the point that it makes sense. And it actually contradicts the word of Yahweh, and it makes sense that it contradicts the word of Yahweh. Man, if you buy into that stuff, you could be sold anything you want. So we need to be hearing with intelligence. In other words, I listen very carefully to what people say. And the words that they choose and the expression on their face in which it's used in that moment tells me everything I need to know by where they're coming from. I watch and I listen very closely. Because words have a lot of power. They have a lot of intent. They have a lot of meaning behind them. And so when Yahweh speaks, we need to hear, we need to perceive, we need to filter it, and we need to understand it cognitively and implant it into the spirit man so that those two are in agreement with the Ruach, so that you don't lose it. His voice. Do not harden, and the word harden is kasha, to the point of being dense in your heart. And boy, was I dealing with that person. Dense! I said, you're very prideful and you're very arrogant and you're stubborn. And just sit there and look at you like, okay, so what? That you just made my point. In our hearts, as in the rebellion, as in the day of trial, which is Masa, which is a, this is interesting, which is a querulous, I'm sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied, quarrelsome judicial temptation in the wilderness. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Querulous judicial temptation. Well, judicial basically means you're judicializing from the Torah. You're using Torah principles to enact a temptation, and it's a kind of arguing. Whenever there's a trial that comes, right away our flesh wants to fight. Get this away from me. I don't want to deal with it, you know? And so that becomes the quarrel part. But the reason why it's coming into your life is because Yahweh has saw something in our lives that we're violating some aspect of spiritual law. That's the judicial part. So now the temptation is there, and he's going to step back and say, look, what is he going to do? Is he going to humble himself and say, I've sinned, I made a mistake, please forgive me? Then I will hear you, and then I will answer you, and then I will forgive you of your sins? Or do we say, oh, no, I'm not guilty of this kind of stuff. No way. Because we're so instant to respond that way, but we don't really stop and think and reflect, as I was telling this person, inside themselves, you know what? I think he got a point. There is something there that ain't right. I don't know what it is exactly. I don't know how to define it. That's okay. That's okay. But the fact that for a moment you were willing to reflect inside yourself and say, that person has a point. There's something wrong there. I need to go seek this out and find out what it is. I need Yahweh to give me an answer as to what is this flaw in this character that makes me do the things that I do over and over and over again in a cycle of defeat in my life, and I can't seem to fight out of this thing. And so we repeat the same process over and over and over, and we don't seem to get tired of it. Yeah, we cry, we moan and groan and complain for a while, or we suffer with finance, or we suffer whatever it is we suffer with, but okay, I know how this works. This deluge comes on me, I get whacked, I get all this down and out, and I get depressed and all that, which is another spirit, it's not from Yahweh, and all this stuff happens, and then it smooths out after a couple of weeks or so, and then life goes back to normal until the next time the devil comes knocking again. Because you don't root it out of your life. That's why he comes back. He has an open door invitation. He has the key to the lock on your door. And he says, you know what? I think I'm a little bored right now. I think I'm going to come back to this person. It's been several months. They've had their rest. I'm going to come back and I'm going to turn their life upside down again. And they open the door and they come in. And here comes the evil solicitation again. And like on autopilot, we take it hook, line, and sinker. And then we got it lodged in our throat, and we're choking on it, and we don't even stop to think, you know, this is really crazy. This is insane. Why do I do this to myself? This is self-abuse, self-mutilation. Why do I do this to myself? This is crazy. This doesn't make any sense. But few people stop to ask them that question. And that's crazy what I told the person. You don't even stop to ask yourself? No. No. So you enjoy the abuse that comes on in your life. No, I don't enjoy it. But you know, it's like I said before. The motivation with humans is very, very elementary. It comes down to two forms of motivation. Pain versus pleasure. That's it. You want to understand anything that's going on in your life, it's pain versus pleasure. So for this person, it comes down to this. The pain of going through this cycle of defeat that comes and visits all the time is less pain than facing the person inside themselves that's causing the destructive paper. That paralyzes them to the point they say, oh no, that's massive pain. I'd rather deal with this smaller pain over here, because at least in between for so many months, I get away free and my life goes back to normal. And then when I get the knock on the door and I see the door open up and my old friend the devil comes back in to introduce this again, oh, here we go again. But it's a whole lot easier, in that person's mind, it's a whole lot easier to deal with that smaller pain than it is to go inside myself and I say to Yahweh, I give myself to you, please root this out of me. At least start with, give me the understanding, where did this stronghold get started in my life in the first place? Because a lot of us have roots inside of us down deep. We don't know where it came from. Some of it's generational curses. Some of it is stuff that we're bringing on ourselves that we're not aware of, that the devil's crept in and he's implanted it into our lives. And now, first it was just a seed. But now the seed is sprouting out of the ground and spreading weeds all over the place. And now you can't ignore it anymore. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I got to a point where I said, this is not going to be easy, but I got to go do what I got to do, irrespective of whatever the consequences are. Okay, let's move on. Where was I? I was down at the end of verse 8. Okay, judicial temptation. Verse 9. When your fathers tested me, they tried me, though they saw my work. For 40 years I was grieved, and it means to the point of cutting, because of detesting you with that generation. That's how Yahweh felt with Israel. He found them detestable. You ever met a person that you feel so detestable towards them? It just makes you want to puke when you're in their presence. That's what it's saying in the Hebrew. With that generation, and said, it is a people who go astray, which means to vacillate and stagger in their hearts, and they do not know my ways. So I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. Some trials are our own doing, and others are designed to show our weakness when our reliance on Yahweh for deliverance. So I was saying, there are some trials that we bring on ourselves. We have nobody to blame except for ourselves. And there are some trials that come on people just because, like what Yeshua said to, I think it was Peter, he said, Peter, Satan has asked for you to sift you as wheat. You know? I would consider that to be a bigger honor than the latter. Because if Satan is asking for you directly, it's because he knows you're righteous, he knows you're doing the right thing, and he knows that if he's able to put enough stuff in your path, enough trials, enough of all these other things that go on in our lives, that he'll get you to falter and your righteousness will be diminished. And therefore insult Yeshua, and if Yeshua is insulted, then the Father's insulted. Because that means their spirit is not powerful enough to transform you to the point that you can't fall. Of course, that's a perversion of logic, but that's the way he thinks. And so some of these trials, when we go through them, we have to try to discern, is this something I brought on myself? I sowed something, so now I'm reaping it? And I would say most of the time that's what it is. Or is this something that Yahweh has mandated, not because you're doing anything wrong, but simply because, you know what? There's a little something in there that I need to brought to the surface. And he needs to be made aware, or she needs to be made aware of it. And I want to see if they're going to deal with it. And if they're not, well, then life is going to get real tough. And it's going to keep visiting you and visiting you and visiting you. So you're so sick and tired of this demon coming into your life causing you so much turmoil that you take control over it. You have the power. You already have the power. The power is in the confession of your tongue. It's just a matter of whether you exercise it or not. In Hebrews chapter 3, verses 12 through 19, it says, "Beware, brethren, lest there be any of you of an evil," and that means degeneration from a virtuous heart. So what he's speaking to is people who are believers, who got to a level, and then they begin to digress backwards. They started to retreat backwards. So in order to have a virtuous heart and degenerate from that, you had to be in that place, and then you're falling away, in other words, of unbelief in departing. See, you can't depart unless you've been there. By instigating one to revolt from the living Elohim. But exhort one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through stubbornness, through the deceitfulness of sin. And that's my point here today, is I'm trying to encourage you all that through my difficulties, you might be able to see something in your life where it's happening to you in your own unique kind of way, how Yahweh has designed your own personal trials and tribulations, that you will be able to apply that same principle to you, because it's universal. It's not like these principles are tailor-made to one person only. These are principles that apply to all of us. It's just a matter of whether or not we choose to confront the darkness in our life and overcome it. Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? If you're not, be my guest. Continue with the abuse. You're a glutton for punishment. But if you're tired of the punishment and you want to get a little bit of victory going on in your life, that, man, there's some things you're going to have to lose in order to win and to gain. It's hard, man. It's really, really hard. I'm not saying it's easy. We're going to have to make some tough choices if you want to get to that point. And I'm not saying I'm there. I'm just simply saying along the way you have to make these choices. It's a matter of what do you want to serve. You want to be a slave to unrighteousness or a slave to righteousness? Okay, verse 14. For we have become partakers of Messiah if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast to the end. There you go. It's that confidence. If you make your decision, don't look back like Lot's wife. Stay steadfast in that confidence. You know, it's amazing to me. I don't know if it happens to you, but it happens to me all the time. There are many times that Yahweh speaks to me, and He gives me a word, and I feel that instantaneous conviction, and I feel like I could just conquer the whole world with that in that moment. And He gives me the instructions to do it. And man, you walk away and you go back out into this world for 5 minutes to deal with business or people or whatever it is you deal with, and how quickly that fire seems to dissipate. And so you have to hold on to that word when it's given to you. It was given to you for a reason. And it's your job to hold on to it and not allow the things of this world to choke that word and take it out of your life. Where you lose that conviction. You lose the conviction, you lose the steadfastness. And then you begin to teeter and totter. And you're wavering. And you become unstable like the waves of the ocean. And that's exactly where Hasatan wants all of us. Verse 15. While it is said, today if you will hear His voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. And this is where we are right now. I had people that said that they are coming today. Swore that they're coming today. They're not here. And I said it before. This is typical. You get a lot of people say they're going to come. I'm going to come. You know, I'm going to be. They don't show up. People's word are not their bond anymore. And this is a frustrating part of the society that we live in, is that people tell you a lot of stuff, but they really don't mean what they say. Or they have ulterior motives behind what they're doing. But, you know, I mean, that's something they're going to have to work through. Verse 16. For who, having heard, rebelled? Indeed, was it not all those who came out of Egypt led by Moses? Now, with whom was He angry 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose corpses fell in the wilderness? That scares the living daylights out of me. Because, man, in my 35 years, I've known so many people in the body of Messiah not around anymore. The vast majority of the people that I have seen over 35 years that come to Messiah, gone. They don't endure. It's like the seed sown by the wayside that Yeshua talked about. As soon as the sun comes up, the trial and the heat, it burns that seed up, and the seed doesn't germinate. It's not in ground. It's not grounded really well. So it can't develop any roots, can't get moisture, can't get nourishment. It dries up. And to whom did he swear that he would not enter his rest, but those who did not obey? So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. See, I said it before, Hasatan is an opportunist. Hasatan, when the scripture says that Satan is like a roaring lion seeking whom he can devour, if you've ever watched these nature programs, when you see that there are times in a lion's life when he hasn't eaten for maybe 2 weeks. And they're supposed to eat basically once a week. But when he hasn't eaten for 2 weeks, he's weak. And he's growling because he's hungry. But unfortunately, he doesn't have the strength to catch a prey. But he's very patient. And if you've ever watched this migration of the wildebeest, they go through these plains, but along the side you got this tall grass. And the lions, they detect how the wind is blowing, so they go all the way downwind, maybe go 3, 4, 5 miles down, and they'll sit there for 2 days in that high grass and wait for the wildebeest to come passing right by. And then they leap out with no effort, and he's got his meal. Satan will set you up in these trials. You won't even see it coming unless you're close enough to Yahweh that he can explain to you, watch out. This is what he has planned for you. We got to get so close to Yahweh to the point that we have the instructions of the enemy in our hands. Because Yahweh's our spy in the land. And I've had many times when he's told me when I'm being set up. And he told me what to do to avoid getting snared in there. And that's what he desires. He doesn't desire to do us harm. He desires to do us good. He doesn't want us to fall into the hands of the enemy. But if we fall into the hands of the enemy and we're in that pit, like we're reading about, like what happened with Joseph, is because you didn't know that the enemy had that pit set up for you and you weren't given instructions about it. So you wandered and you fell in. Not that he can't get you out. He can. Okay. Yahweh wants to test you to endorse you. He who is faithful in little will be faithful in much. Don't worry about the big stuff later. Do what you were instructed to do now. The other stuff will fall into place as you go along. So don't have these grand ideas about these massive things. Man, I've seen so many people over the years, I was praying and God told me this and told me that, and I'm going to do this and that. I said, are you even doing this little thing over here? No, I don't need to. He's going to shoot me right up to the top. Praise Jesus. Okay. It never works out. It never works out. If you're not going to do the little stuff, he's not going to endorse you to do the bigger stuff. It's not easy. I'm not trying to paint an easy path in this. It's not easy. It requires a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, a lot of studying of Scripture, a lot of application, a lot of humbling yourself, acknowledging that you've fallen short, that you need the help. Without doing those things, you're on your own. You're in your own arm of your own flesh, and boy, you're going to have nothing but hell to pay going down that road. And I did enough years of that I don't care to visit that anymore. Okay, in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 35 through 40, it says, women received their dead raised to life again. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a resurrection. Still others had trials of mockings and scourgings, yes, and of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, were tempted, were slain with the sword. I'm reading this, and a good way to put yourself in perspective, you guys have probably seen, I've watched TV, and there's a commercial that comes on, I think it's for St. Jude's Hospital, the Shriners Hospital, And you see these poor children who are missing limbs and all this stuff, or they're dealing with cancer and their heads are bald and stuff. And you sit there and you think to yourself, I got nothing like this going on in my life compared to this poor kid that's just starting out in life. And this one may not make it. You know, they say 1 in 5 die of cancer or whatever. But in the meantime, their life is hell, you know. And it's like, comparison is a good thing, because it puts your life in perspective and you realize, you know, I really don't have it that bad. You know, Anthony told me one time, I thought it was really good, you know, he was complaining to Yahweh about this and that and the other, and then Yahweh spoke to him and says, well, hold on a second, let's look at this just a little bit. You riding in your car on I-95, you got the windows down, the wind's blowing in your hair. Well, he don't have any hair right now, but it's blowing across his skinhead, you know. You going to work, you're making money, you're working in the air conditioning and all this stuff. Would you rather be back where you were 20 years ago? And boy, did that put things in perspective for him. And that's exactly the way it is. It's always about perspective. It's always about taking stock in your life to find out, where am I now? Where was I so many years ago? Am I better off or am I worse off? And so every now and then we need to have a life crisis adjustment in our life to make sure that we're grounded in the right place and not entertaining vain imaginations, as we're told that we need to sequester when they come into our minds. Verse 37, they were stoned, they were sawn in two. I read that already. No. They were stoned, sawn in two, tempted, were slain with a sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and dens and the caves of the earth. Verse 39. And all these, having attained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise of divine assurance. In the Greek, it means divine assurance. Verse 40. Elohim, having provided something better for us, that they, the patriarchs of old, should not be made perfect apart from us. We're all going to be glorified as sons of Elohim together at the same time of the blowing of the seventh trumpet on the feast of Yom Teruah. All right, learning obedience through trials. In Hebrews chapter 5, verse 14, it says, so also Messiah did not glorify himself to become high priest. But it was he, the Father, in other words, who said to him, you are my son, today I have begotten, regenerated with conception of you. In verse 6, as he also says in another place, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek, who in the days of the flesh, when he offered up prayers and supplications, which is to approach for favor. Supplications means to approach for favor. You're asking a favor of Yahweh. Not a demand, not a proclamation of what he's mandated you to do, but simply you're asking for a favor. With vehement, forcible cries. Forcible cries. In other words, you're inducing it on purpose. You're so desperate to the point that you have to cry out. There's nothing else you can do as a human being except force yourself into crying. I don't know how you can go beyond that, except to the point of passing out when you're so overloaded with all these emotions and stuff that you can't even function anymore. Cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death and was heard because of his fear of Elohim. Great, what does it say? Great love have those who love his commandments, and they have, and they fear him. I forget what is in Psalm 119, somewhere back in there. Anyway, let's continue on. Verse 8. Though he was a son, yet he learned obedience by the things he suffered, by experiencing a sensation of pain. Pain is a great motivator if you use it to your advantage. Most people run from pain. It's been scientifically proven that human beings 80% of the time will do anything to avoid pain, and only 20% of the time gravitate towards something that is pleasurable. Interesting. Pain is a massive motivator for human beings, in the negative and the positive. So in the negative, people avoid pain, but that's the carnal mind of man. That's how Satan wired the carnal mind of man, is to avoid pain. But Yahweh's basically saying, I want to slay your flesh to the point that your flesh has no more screaming and yelling to do when it's in pain. And so the inner man winds up dominating the fleshly man, and the inner man says, bring it on, buddy. Bring it on. I love the pain. I love the suffering. Because the reward that I'm going to get with it far surpasses the alternative. You are going against the flesh, the law of the flesh. 99.9% of the people will not do that. They don't want anything happening to their flesh. They want to hold their opinions, their emotions, their attitudes the way that they want to have it. And don't you come over here and tell me anything any different. Who are you? That's what they say. Who are you? Okay. Verse 9. And having been perfected, he became the author of eternal salvation to all who obey him. So what it's saying here is because he was willing to learn obedience to the things that he suffered, that qualified him to be the author. He was tested to be endorsed. And he got his endorsement. And now he's trying to endorse us and bring us through the same kind of program that he went through. But we're bucking and fighting. I don't want to do that. There's got to be an easier way. There's got to be an easier way. Just like Moses. Got to be an easier way. I don't speak very well. I stutter. Can't we get us another guy that's eloquent in speech? That's got to be a better way to do it, isn't it? But that's how we humans are. We like to rationalize things that Yahweh considers irrational in his world. Our rationalization is irrational to Yahweh. He understands it, but it's garbage. It's baloney. And he doesn't have any use for it. Called by Elohim as high priest according to the order of Melchizedek, verse 11, of whom we have much to say and hard to explain, since you have become sluggish and lazy of learning. Sluggish and lazy of learning. We're not applying ourselves. If we apply ourselves, we become much more effective. For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the first principles, which is an orderly arrangement of the oracles of Elohim. You can find it also in Hebrews chapter 6, verse 1 through 6. Paul talks about, actually the first 3 verses, he talks about the basic elementary principles of Messiah. We should all at least have that down. In which is an orderly arrangement of the oracles of Elohim, and you have come to need milk and not solid food. For everyone who partakes of milk is unskilled, that lacks experience in the word of righteousness. And there you go. You have to apply what you're reading to life. You can't just read it like a book and you walk away and say, well, okay, I'm faced with this situation in my life, in this trial, and I need to apply these principles. I'm going to grit my teeth, I'm going to swallow my pride, which we don't want to do, and I'm going to grin and bear it, and I'm going to bear through this thing because that's what Yahweh is telling me to do. He's not telling me to rise up and fight against this. I'm going to take my beatings, and I'm going to take it patiently because that's what it says. Anything contrary to that is not of faith. And whatever is not of faith is what? Sin. If you won't get with the program, you are a sinner in the body of Messiah. I include myself. That's the bottom line. We're a sinner. If we don't do it by faith, we are a sinner and we are backsliding, and you're wasting your time proclaiming the name of Yeshua. Sin is the transgression of the law. 1 John 3:4. Okay. For by this, okay, I read that. Okay, everyone who okay, I read that. Okay, lacks experience in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe, and this is interesting, like a babe, which in the Greek means like an infant that cannot speak intelligently, but is simple-minded. That's what it means in the Greek. So it's like if you listen to a baby, it can't really articulate words very well. It doesn't make any sense. You're babbling a bunch of stuff out of your mouth that is not spiritual, it's not scriptural. At least not from a clean spirit. And that's very common in the body of Messiah. But solid, because we're mixing stuff. We're going over to other religions and we're bringing that stuff in, that garbage into the body of Messiah. When it was supposed to be left behind. When you come out of Egypt, stay out of Egypt. It's that simple. It's a simple plan. It's really simple. It's a narrow path. We just got to discover that path for each of us and stay on that path. Don't complicate it. Verse 14, but solid food belongs to those who are full of age through labor and growing in moral character. That's what it means in the Greek. That is, those who by reason have used their senses, which is proper perception, exercised with training to discern through judicial estimation of both good and evil. Did you get that? Did it make sense? Was it understandable? Let me read it again. But solid food belongs to those who are full of age through labor and growth in moral character. That is, the way you attain that, those who by reason have their senses, which is proper perception, exercising it. In other words, you got to do something with what you're hearing. With training, you got to apply it to training, to discern through judicial estimation. In other words, you got to go to the Torah and see what the Torah says about this particular thing. And you got to meditate on that and pray about it and figure out how does that apply. Estimation both of good and evil. That's what we got to do. That's how we learn between that which is acceptable and what is not acceptable, especially when you're in the heat of the moment. When all hell is broken loose in your life and everything is in disarray and people are going berserk around you. Pedro, you've been in that situation, so you can speak to that as you have in the past. But when all hell is broken loose and everybody's losing their heads and they're losing their calm and they're all looking at you and they're all putting the pressure on you and it's like, what do I do? The flesh wants to say, just go along to get along. Mm-hmm. No, you don't go along to get along. You're supposed to be different. You're supposed to be one that steps out there and you set the standard. You're the one who's supposed to step out of the boat and say, oceans, be calm. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to be that calm, reassuring voice in the midst of the adversity, in the midst of the trial. Yahweh wants all this for all of us. These are tools in our possession that many people through history really didn't have. We have the luxury of going in and looking at the original language, understanding what the words really mean, what they intend. Back in them days, they had to go to the shul or they had to go to the temple to hear something for a little bit, but they didn't have the luxury that we have. And so Yahweh is calling us to a higher standard. And so we have to do everything that we can to really count the cost of this walk that we're in. Am I in or am I out? Like Pedro was saying last week. We have a responsibility. We have a mandate. You have a mandate. You have a responsibility. And it's about getting real with yourself first. It's like I told the person, if you're not going to get real with yourself, you're not going to get real with me. So stop the foolishness. Go straighten your carcass out, and then you come back and we have a discussion. Because I won't sit here and listen to the spinning of lies. It's not authentic. It's not real. It's deception. You're self-deluded. And that's not acceptable to me. And I won't sit here and I won't entertain it any longer. In the meantime, be prepared. Because you're going to be the bad guy. Because you are willing to put your foot down for righteousness and establish law and order. Establish Torah principle. Establish the fact that you're willing to reach out and help this person out of this dark hole they're in. Whether they choose to take your hand and be lifted out or not is not anything you have any control over. But the one thing you don't want to do is reach yourself down into a pit of vipers and they pull you in with them. Beware of Satan's devices. Make sure you seek the counsel of Yahweh and ask him, help me, Yahweh. In the midst of this trial I'm going through, I want to come out on the other side of this thing being stronger than when I went into this. That which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. With that in mind, let's close in prayer. Abba, Father, we just want to bless you and thank you again for this Sabbath. Thank you for bringing forth your word, Abba. I pray that this word is a source of encouragement and instruction, Abba. I pray, and I thank you, Abba, because it encouraged me even when I wasn't feeling encouraged, which was the opening of my prayer, Abba. And I thank you for that. And Abba, we need your help, Abba. We are so dearly need your help because a lot of us are in a lot of trouble. And Abba, I don't proclaim to know how you're going to get us out of this state of mind that so many of us are in, and I include myself. But I'm praying, Abba, that somehow you get us out of this mess. Because we're just so far down the road, Abba. If it ain't for you stepping in, we don't have a chance in the world. I've come to a point that without you, I know there ain't nothing I can do. All I can do is get in agreement with, no matter how much my flesh is bucking and fighting, doing what you want me to do. All I can do is say, Hineni, here I am. I'm going to go do it. I don't want to do it. I'm not in the mood to do it. I don't feel like doing it. I detest doing it, but I'm here doing it. And at the end of the day, I'm going to find a way through that mess. And I'm going to begin to like it. This was your criticism of Jeremiah the prophet. It was the same thing with him, Yahweh. He was speaking to a people that didn't want to hear him. They wanted to kill him. They didn't like his message. But and he drifted away from his mandate. And you told him that you didn't tell him in advance that when he was going to go do this as a prophet, that the people were going to listen to him. And that he had the right to drop out of this thing just because the people weren't listening. That wasn't the condition. You gave him a message. You gave him a mandate. You told him that was what he needs to do. Now he needs to go, not only go do it, but he needs to go back and he needs to enjoy that which he doesn't enjoy doing. And then he'll be in the right place. That's a hard place, Abba. That's a real hard place. Help us, Abba, to find the joy back again in our calling, whatever that happens to be, and empower your people to do great works for you in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen.
Amen.